Hey, good people. I'm Jason Valcourt, and I'm going to share with you a little bit more from the Jim Croce story. I'm here checking on my folks' house, hanging out next to the popcorn machine in all of its glory. But as I've been reading this book, I have been going on a little bit of a roller coaster, recognizing and realizing how painful it was for Jim and Ingrid in those early days. They were so poor. Struggling really hard. Jim was really struggling to make it as a musician, and they really were living the starving artist lifestyle, and really just wanted to make it into a career. But they had signed some really bad contracts. Jim had signed some really bad contracts against Ingrid's intuition. At least that's how it's stated here in the book. And they weren't getting any support as musicians, and some real struggles. And later the fortunes changed a bit, but in these early times, like late 60s and the very 1970 or so, they were really struggling. And Jim had work as a construction laborer and various other jobs, and he had many jobs. And Ingrid was making pottery, selling pottery, and doing artwork. And when they lived out in Pennsylvania, out in a farmhouse, a chapter of their life where they lived in Lindell, Pennsylvania. And so they had relied on Jim's VW Bug all these years, and they called it the Raisin, and traveled around in it primarily as their main car. But there's this moment here that illustrates the hard chapter of vehicle karma that they had, where they went through something like 13 vehicles, and it sort of just illustrates to me how challenged they were financially and where they were at in general. And it kind of further sets the stage for becoming an actual star later, when Jim becomes a star. And I imagine most folks that are struggling with art or a creative endeavor, it's easy to forget how hard times are part of the pathway for most people. Stars aren't made overnight, and there's a lot of struggle that you have to bear along the way if you're committed. I guess at least that's the starving artist experience for many. But I thought I'd share this with you because it's fairly entertaining and pretty remarkable how many cars they went through. So I'm going to read this section here. In Lindell, Jim's old, loyal Volkswagen began to break down. Often he was left stranded on dark country roads on his way to or from work. With more than 200,000 miles on the odometer, the car was too far gone to repair. The Raisin had become part of the family, and Jim decided it deserved a proper funeral. When he covered it with a coat of black spray paint, he and I were surprised at how much better it looked. We were even tempted to postpone the burial and see if we could make any money by selling it. Jim cracked a bottle of Budweiser and poured some over the hood, blessing the worn-out old friend. Then we drove the car to a lot by our old home in Media and parked it, leaving a sign in the window that read, "For sale, runs, best offer." 2 days later, it sold for $50. My stepmom took pity on us and donated the Oldsmobile that had been sitting in her driveway since my dad had died 3 years earlier. Jim and I graciously accepted the handout, tinkered with it, and got it running. It sparked and sputtered up the road to the farmhouse, then died in the driveway. It never ran again. Over the next few months, we went through a couple of $50 junkyard specials. In late spring, Bill Reed loaned Jim $100 for a down payment on a gunmetal gray 1956 Ford sedan in great condition. But the thrill of driving the beautiful $500 four-door lasted only 2 days. Someone played a dirty trick and poured sugar in the gas tank. The Ford never ran again. By summer, the word of the Croce's car jinx spread. Jim's friend Ronnie Miller offered to let us trade in his old Jeep for a more reliable one. Jim took Ron up on the offer and we drove to New Jersey, where Jim bargained with a used car dealer and traded the old Jeep for a newer one, agreeing to take it as is. He thought the Jeep looked perfect. We cleaned the sticker price off the windshield and headed for the Jersey Turnpike. A few miles down the road, the transmission dropped out. 2 hours later, Ronnie towed the just-purchased Jeep to our home, where it sat and never ran again. A neighbor's brother leaving for Vietnam also wanted to help us out and lent us his beautiful 1968 Peugeot station wagon. We scored a perfect 3 days on the new wheels. In the middle of the night, the emergency brake mysteriously released. Early the next morning, when Jim went down to Frank's Folly to get the newspaper, he discovered the car had crashed into a cement bridge abutment right in front of the store. The wrecked Peugeot never ran again. Mercifully, because Jim was working, even though it was a blue-collar job, Jim's father bought us a navy blue Opel station wagon. Embarrassed by his need, Jim didn't dare tell his father the car was a lemon. He had to park it on hills to jump-start it, and the second day we got it, the passenger side door fell off the hinges. Then the front seat came loose, and the outside mirror fell off. I swear they delivered this car to the wrong address, Jim told me. This one was intended for the clowns at Ringling Brothers. He laughed outwardly at our car curse, but perpetually penniless. He grew angry and frustrated at his inability to get ahead. Sounds like a crazy chapter of vehicles for them, and kind of illustrates where they were in their struggle and sets the stage for some future success when resources actually started coming in. But man, this book is, it's a pretty heavy read there, in a way. There's so much struggle involved and so many obstacles, particularly for Jim in particular. He had a heavy relationship with his folks. They really, really did not want him to pursue music, and outwardly and actively discouraged him from pursuing a career in music, and even held like resources over his head, like waiting for him to get a white-collar job or any kind of job that they deemed worthwhile, and really gave him a hard time about it. And it's really impressive that, that Jim Croce, being who we know as Jim Croce, actually had such an obstacle right in his family. So interesting, knowing what actually happened. So that was a little bit of the Croce story. I'm continuing to read it, and I have a few more things I'm sure I'll share. I hope you enjoyed that. Take care. Stay kind.